It was never that good to begin with. God didn't create an earth with lights in the sky, one of them was a real blaster, going around it. God created a universe 13.78 billion years ago. Up until mankind discovered that the earth was ancient, in the last quarter of the 18th century, the version God gave Abraham was fine. It fit all the observable data. Then in the middle of the 19th century humankind discovered evolution, and in the first quarter of the 20th discovered that the sun, don't let me forget Galileo, who discovered that the earth rotated on its own axis and made a year-long trip in orbit around the sun. In the first quarter of the 20th century humankind discovered that first, the Milky Way was a galaxy, and second that there were tons of other galaxies. Now in the 21st century we guess there are roughly 1 trillion other galaxies, and know the universe's age to at least 3 significant digits, i.e. 13.78 billion years. Evolution guarantees that whatever reproduces will be tough and feisty. Humankind, or Homo sapiens sapiens, the one true and only surviving hominid species, didn't even hear from God until a time that he chose. 4,000 years ago, or a bit more, an early origin story was the commonly accepted description of the world we live in and what the rules are. Many hundreds of years later a revised version of that became Genesis. In it God breathed his instructions, righteous behavior, love, mercy, patience, multiple covenants, all of which humans broke, and a final one in which Jesus paid the price of our failure. Data point, in Abraham's time a serious covenant between two serious parties included taking some livestock, cutting them in half with one half on each side to a small pathway, then walking between them, down the garden path so to speak, and swearing that failure to uphold one's end of the bargain entitled the other party to do with the offender as had been done with the livestock. So now you know the rest of the story, so to speak, Jesus paid the price on our behalf. That kind of covenant, and that kind of price. Along the way, God's illustrated his deep theology with stories that encapsulated, not just a moral, but a bone-deep intuitive illustration of what he meant. We, as evolved hominids all feisty, red in tooth and fingernail as it were, needed to move our behavior toward a kind of purity and holiness we had no real way to imagine. Adam and Eve disbelieved God when tempted, didn't consult with God when disinformation came to them, disobeyed, then lied. Their consequence was blood, tears, sweat and toil. Anguish in childbirth, helpless, dependent, aging into aches and senescence, and death. All of these, we understand today, were the consequences of having been evolved rather than created 1/6 day from dust. But for reasons that are simple to guess at, God's data dump onto the Bronze Age tribe of Abraham was fully appropriate for that age. Today we live in the age of telescopes and computers. We know that Genesis telescoped creation, and rearranged it. Let there be light should have been verse 1, chapter 1, instead of verse 3. It's tempting to see that as God's little wink at us, to say that Genesis is theology and deed of title, but that in time we'd be able to read the speech the heavens spew forth night after night, Psalm chapter 9 verse 2. The entire Pentateuch may or may not relate well to what we find in geology and archaeology of the Holy Land. Tremendous amounts of it, especially the historical books that follow, match up very very well. So does the New Testament. But its value, which humankind should never mistake, is its teaching, its theology, its promise of a loving God who provides grace to those who ask for it. The whole unified universe including ourselves is named as God by the enlightened seers. Narayana Rishi perceives God Purusha indeed as this universe, what has been and what is to come. Rigveda 10:90. So, we are not separate from the universe. Sri Krishna says, I am the primal source of all, the evolution of all comes from me. Gita 10:8. So, how can we be separate from God? Our five senses, eyes, skin, ear, tongue, nose are the ambassadors of five great elements in the universe, fire, air, sky, water and earth respectively. Our mind, intellect and ego sense are the manifestations of rajas, sattva, and tamas respectively. It is the threefold cosmic energy of the universe. All beings arise from, and rest in this Kshara Varada, visible form of the universe. Our essence and spirit, Chaitanya, is the reflection of the all-pervading eternal Akshara Atman, the divine sweetness and light of the universe. Form and essence can never be separated. With this direct vision of truth, it is proved beyond doubt that we are not separate from God, universe.